Congressman, there was this brief moment this summer when Trump indicated he may tone down his rhetoric. But in the past month, he's really done the opposite. He's now said more than once his political rivals are bigger enemies than foreign adversaries like Russia. He's talked about using the U.S. military against Americans. He's floated a purge-like day of police brutality to combat crime. He said if he loses, Jewish voters will be partly to blame. And he called Harris mentally disabled. Is this how you win over those undecideds or those Haley voters in this final stretch?
Typically, it's not, Anna, and you're right. Donald Trump did have a big opportunity after that prominent assassination attempt in July to garner all of that goodwill that existed for him in the country at the time from all across the political spectrum. He had the opportunity to pivot. He said he would, and I think he really thought about it. But at the end of the day, he snapped back to who he has always been, someone who wants to divide and conquer, who really just wants to max out his base. Big contrast there with Vice President Harris today going to Fox News, not a comfortable place for her. Also meeting with Republicans and showcasing Republican support. So both of these candidates are desperately trying to just get across the finish line. Donald Trump is doing it by going back to the well, his tried and true strategy, which hasn't really worked most of the time. He's lost 3 consecutive general elections when you think about what happened in 18, 20, and 22. And, Kamala Harris really trying to expand that tent, trying to welcome some of those Trump skeptical Republicans into her coalition.
Jonathan, as Congressman mentioned, she has this Fox interview coming up today. Will Vice President, do you think, highlight the extreme things Donald Trump has done, or should she focus on her vision?
I think she should do both. By going to Fox, she's going to the Trump base, but she's also going to where Republicans go to get their news. Those are the people who voted for Nikki Haley. Those are the people who voted for anyone other than Donald Trump. And so you should expect to hear her make the same message she's been making on the campaign trail, talking about democracy and rule of law, talking about her plans for the future, and saying to the Fox audience, look, we're not going to agree on everything, but if you elect me president, I will work with Republicans to solve problems for the American people. And just to pick up on something that the former congressman said, I never for a minute believed that Donald Trump would pivot to a kinder, gentler version after that first assassination attempt. And we saw it. I was sitting right there in Milwaukee during his acceptance speech. The first 20 minutes was something different. The next 80 minutes were more of the same. And what we have seen since Milwaukee has just been an amping up of the dark, negative, hateful rhetoric that we saw coming out of that convention. And it just, I don't know, it defies logic how you take the message that the former president has out there on the campaign trail and have people believe that he is going to be a leader for all Americans. I just don't see it.
Jonathan, Harris has really ramped up her outreach to black voters, specifically men. Here's another part of that town hall with Charlamagne Tha God, where she talked about the pandemic.
Or whether we're going to admire dictators and send during the height of COVID and the pandemic, COVID tests that nobody could get to the president of Russia for his personal use when black people were dying every day by the hundreds during that time.
Yeah, I feel like that one has gone over people's heads, the fact that he was sending COVID tests to Putin.
What do you think, Jonathan? Will that resonate?
Yes, it will resonate. Look, the interview with Charlamagne Tha God that the vice president did yesterday was her at her best. At her finest. She was comfortable. She spoke about what she wanted to do for the country. And also, Charlamagne is, for not being a political journalist, he's one of the best political interviewers out there of candidates and elected officials. And what we saw in that response was she was reminding not just black people, but Americans that when we were going through that horrible pandemic, and we saw with our own eyes just how disproportionately people of color and African Americans in particular were impacted by that pandemic. And then to find out through Bob Woodward's book, War, that Trump was sending COVID tests to a dictator, that should resonate. It absolutely should resonate because the president of the United States is supposed to have the health and well-being of the American people first and foremost in their minds and in their actions. And the fact that he put Russia and the dictator of Russia ahead of the American people should be galling.
And I mentioned how she was really trying to court the black vote as she's doing some of her outreach this week. And we know people of color were even more impacted in the times of COVID, especially earlier on in that pandemic time, than white voters and white Americans. Meantime, in Atlanta, we heard this from Trump related to black and Hispanic Americans who don't support him.
And I'll tell you what, any African American or Hispanic, and you know how well I'm doing there, that votes for Kamala, you got to have your head examined because they are really screwing you.
Congressman Curbelo, he has now said this about black voters, Hispanic voters, Jewish voters, Catholic voters. What do you make of it?
Well, Anna, it's the divisive rhetoric that we have become accustomed to hearing from Donald Trump. This is just who he is. This is how he tries to win elections, divide and conquer. He has had some success with Hispanic voters, and he's hoping to add to that. I don't think the strategy he's using in terms of insulting those who aren't supporting him, I don't think that's the best strategy.
Could it
but
backfire,
certainly he
in fact?
has made some significant gains with Hispanics, and he's going to Univision. So clearly Trump sees the Hispanic community as a community where he can win more votes.
Well, we'll see. Thank you very much, former Congressman Carlos Curbelo and Jonathan Capehart. Appreciate you guys.